No worries, no worries. So yeah, here you go. Um, Hi everyone. So we have Clarence here with us. Um, he's the VP of development at Elastos. Elastos has been very supportive of this entire summit and our hackathon as well. So please, Clarence, please take it forward from here. Thanks.
Great. Hi, my name is Clarence, and I'm the VP of Development at Elastos. I've also been a software engineer for about 8 to 10 years. But I got into Elastos a couple of years ago, stroke of luck, but got really lucky to travel around the world and talk about blockchain for about 2 years. So I've been on the conference track quite a bit, got a lot of exposure to many different blockchain projects. It's a really great space. And although I'm talking about the future of money, also I definitely do want to take more of a developer angle to it, to why as a developer you want to be interested in blockchain and where's blockchain going and where are the opportunities here. So let me get started with the slides here. So can everyone see my slides? Can you check, Anifab? Can you confirm that my slides are working? Don't do that. Great. So future of money. So a second. Let me just get set up here to make sure things are working. Okay, great. So I believe things are working right now, right? So I'll get started. So the future of money and decentralized business model. So I'm going to talk very generally about where the blockchain and DeFi is going. So hopefully you've all heard of what DeFi is, right? So decentralized finance. And so just quick primer on DeFi. DeFi is decentralized finance is actually just traditional finance services that you expect, but in a decentralized manner, which means instead of having banks, we use the blockchain. And one of the best things about this is that it's pretty much always on. There's no reason why your bank shuts down at 6 p.m. and why can't I trade stocks on the weekend? Like these kind of things should be problems that we've already addressed by now, but they haven't been. And so with blockchain and decentralized finance, this gives us kind of an always on system that also has many other benefits, but most of all, it always being on means you always have access to the banking system. So the future of money is a new freedom from traditional institutions. So no longer do you have to rely on banks or brokers or even governments to manage your identity. The future is about being able to self-manage these things and your money. It's a very difficult transition, of course, right? There's a lot of knowledge and education that goes into teaching regular users how to safeguard their identities and their own private keys. These are things that developers usually deal with. So there has to be a bit of a compromise, which I'll talk about later, between the real world and what our developers are used to, which is the safe dealing with PKI, like public key infrastructure and cryptographic keys. I mean, those are not things that regular people deal with. Another thing is that there's actually a very large amount of people who actually don't even have access to basic financial products. So they can't take out loans, they don't have credit scores. I'll touch this on later, but over 1 billion people as of 2018 are estimated not even to have their identities, which is really difficult. Like, how do you take out a loan if you don't even have an identity, right? So these are all problems that blockchain really does want to tackle. I mentioned here that Kiva.org is a very great example of a project that has already issued 1.5 billion in loans to, if you're a poor farmer that just wants to buy a better type of seeds, maybe some genetically modified seeds to have a better crop yield next year, and you don't have the money for that, maybe you could take out a $50 loan and get those seeds, and that's actually very intrinsically great for the world, right? But let's think simplicity, right? Simplistically. The blockchain is very similar to cash. It allows for peer-to-peer transfer online. I mean, there's one thing is there's nothing to stop you from going somewhere, meeting someone, giving them cash, right? So at the end of the day, the governments can't actually come down on regular people trying to use blockchain to send money, because you could do it with cash. There are a whole set of laws that I'll go into later on, talking about regulations and obstacles, where really need to discuss, how do we operate in this new world where it seems like the governments are trying to crack down on blockchain. But there's a very good argument to be made that with blockchain being so similar to cash, for example, if you try to send $10,000 with the traditional system, they do need to flag, an SRP, suspicious transaction, report, something like that. But you don't have to do that. If you just give your friend $50,000 in cash, you don't actually need to file anything, right? Which should be possible. So you should be able to send Bitcoin without actually dealing with any regulations, and that should be possible if you can create entire decentralized systems where, as long as people are sending money directly to people, that shouldn't really have any legal implications. And that's actually really profound, because it allows us to be very creative about how we build things to make the flow of money and the friction as low as possible. And we do hope that in 50 years from now, the blockchain would be the go-to place for all your banking needs. So why should you care as a developer? So if you look at just where the market's going, let's just talk about trading market right now, right? Just how much money is changing hands per day. So from 2019 to 2020, it pretty much doubled. That's 70 billion USD of daily trading volumes. That's staggering. That really just means that $70 million of transaction fees at least are being made by the exchanges that you see out there. So that's a lot of money, right? And then in the DeFi space, you already have $6 billion in digital assets. Sorry, I mean, that's supposed to be locked. So locked, and it's increasing, right? You get $100 million per month now being moved onto the blockchain. And that's actually a very small figure. If you think about how big NASDAQ and Forex market now, it's in the trillions, $16 trillion of trading per day. So when you look at 16 trillion, and right now we're at 70 billion, there's actually a lot of upside. There's, at the current projected rate, we would easily hit over $200 billion in daily trading volume by 2025, and that's just at the current rate. So there's a new class of decentralized exchanges coming online that are non-custodial. What non-custodial means is that the traders don't have to actually risk their funds. They lock them in a smart contract. And by doing that, and you can look at these like DYDX, these are all these decentralized exchanges. By doing that, we could probably onboard more institutional investors who currently are sitting on the sidelines because they're worried about the funds getting hacked and stuff like that. So new money markets, what you can create now as a developer are applications that can help people lend money, which a lot of people have a lot of money sitting around, which they would love to lend at a certain interest rate. A lot of people want to borrow money, same thing. Pool Together is a really cool application that a few developers put together, which lets you, it's kind of like a no-risk lottery game. So you can put it in your die, and then every week there's a reward. So based on the pool of die, they put it in financial products like Compound and things like that, which generate a return. And every week somebody out of the pot wins, a few $100s. So it's actually really cool. These little things that people can do wouldn't be possible without blockchain. And then you have all these other creative solutions to money, like Ampleforth, which they change the liquidity to meet demand, which is really, really interesting. Stable coins, you must have heard of those. Bonded curves, you might have heard of curve finance. These are all things to look into and see what they're doing. There's a lot of creativity that can be done by, if you know a little bit about development and a little bit about finance and economics. There's new fundraising avenues. This is probably what everyone likes, right? So yeah, everyone knows about ICOs. So if you have a project, you could still do an ICO. It's not like 2017. It's a lot harder to find investors, but it is still possible. You have to do things properly. You do need a bit of a legal background or some some research and a bit of budget for the legal side of things, but it's still definitely possible. You can always do STOs. The reason why people don't like STOs, so security token offerings, is because STOs can only be sold to accredited investors, which there aren't too many, right? You have to be an accredited investor in the US, at least, requires having over, say, $500,000 in assets or an advanced degree of some sort. So it's a lot harder to sell when you can only sell to a small group of people. But it's getting better, though. There's also this, in the US, there's a new thing called Regulation A+. Now, I know I'm speaking to the India audience, so I don't know what kind of avenues they've created over there, but that's also something maybe I believe that the community or developers should advocate for. Security tokens are a really great way to raise money as long as the people know what they're getting into. It's a lot less friction than the current financial systems. We do want to create these because if India doesn't do it, then they're going to get left behind because the rest of the world is doing this. So let's talk about regulation obstacles. So if you are trying to raise money now, you do have to be careful. There is a lot of KYC AML requirements because of money laundering. So you can't just haphazardly walk into writing a DeFi application anymore. I don't know what the laws are in India again, but just speaking from the US side of things, we have FinCEN, we have SEC, we have CFTC. So if you're creating derivatives, you're going to definitely need legal help for sure. So that's like options, futures contracts. As soon as you start doing that, which is really amazing. I mean, we definitely want to create more products like that. But as soon as you start doing that, there are legal obstacles. So you definitely want to be careful of the legal side of things. But also, if you figure them out, that also gives your company a huge IP advantage over the other ones. So I do advocate for going into that. So before we tackle the future of money, another big thing that we need to tackle first is we need to tackle how to teach users how to manage their own identities. It's not going to work in this new system if people lose their private keys to their wallet, and if that wallet also manages your identity, then you lose your identity as well. That's worse than, say, losing your passport, because at least if you lose your passport, you can go to the government and issue a new one, right? So if we moved identities on-chain and the wallets on-chain, then people are ultimately responsible for their own funds, which actually a lot of people don't enjoy. A lot of people don't want to have to worry about their funds. They rather trust a centralized entity like a bank or the government to manage it. Some people, however, don't trust their governments or their banks, right? So maybe perhaps in India or in the US, we do trust our banks, but down in South America, there's a lot of uprisings and things like that, or or corruption. People don't trust their governments or their banks, or they just don't have access to them. So that's a huge problem. And SSI does give us an ability to help those people. So the 1 billion people in the world that don't have a way to prove identity, we can actually help them. And they might actually prefer a decentralized system, and they might actually take the time to learn about how to do this. So there's definitely an untapped market in the rest of the world. So don't just think about India, but think about the rest of the world. If you create a really good product, it can also be used by anyone in the whole world, right? So we do have standards like W3C DIDs, so decentralized identifiers. That's another thing that is an Elastos technology that I want to bring to your attention. This is, if you even get started looking at the identity problem, you do want to look in the W3C DID specification. That gives us ways to store identities, sign verifiable credentials, but that doesn't address the KYC problem. So KYC is know your customer, so that requires certain centralized entities to actually go out, verify that this person is who they say it is, and then sign some sort of declaration that says, I vouch for this, this identity is who he is, right? So great projects like Uport on Ethereum, Evernym, which is built on the Sovereign blockchain, which is custom-built SSI blockchain, BiddyPass, 3FA solution, I'll talk about it later. IBM verified credentials, so Hyperledger private blockchains. And then Elastos, we have our Elastos vouch capsule too. So 3FA, so that's another thing that really would is an obstacle that we have. It's you've probably heard of 2FA, you might not have heard of 3FA. 3FA is really important because we do probably need biometrics attached to things, especially when we're talking about your identity. So 3FA means three things: something you know, something you are, and something you have. So first step of getting the general public educated is giving them some sort of card. At the World Bank, they actually had this really cool card. I used to have a picture of it, but it's a simple card with a fingerprint reader and a password entry screen, and that kind of solved everything. It did the biometrics, it had the password, and it was a hardware card, right? So the World Bank did that. There's all these other solutions that are coming out, but this is something that we really do need. And we also need a federated system that can revoke or reissue keys. So like I said earlier, we can't have people losing their identity. We do have to have some sort of compromise. We do have to trust somebody at the end of the day. It could be the World Bank, it could be the UN, whoever people really can trust. There has to be someone that holds sort of maybe a master or cold key that can revoke and reissue the key, so you don't ever have to risk losing access to your identity, right? Let me pause here and switch to decentralized business models. So for a developer, unfortunately, the job market for blockchain jobs is still pretty small. There's a few reasons for this, but there's one thing that I do want to call out that's somewhat unintuitive. So many decentralized business models encroach on existing lucrative, inefficient processes with many intermediaries that usually benefit greatly from the status quo. What I mean from that is, take an example, is insurance markets. In insurance markets, especially in the US, there's a lot of middlemen that take a cut, and they really don't add any value to the system. And you could really rewrite all of these insurance systems with decentralized models that cut out all the middlemen, right? But if you did that, you're disrupting their income, and at the end of the day, there's less money to be made in total. And what that really means is that if there's less money made in total, these business models actually turn into utilities. So what I really mean by that is, if you look at something like Airbnb, Airbnb, they run a business. They allow you to rent your own home out, right? But if you think of what Airbnb is, they are an internet company, but they also have a back office. Now, if you put that entire back office on the blockchain, then Airbnb can run on a blockchain, and the website could be the website. So you don't really need a back office anymore. Everything from the contracts that say you own a property to the rental fees can all be done on the blockchain. If you do that and you open source everything, then anyone can come in and copy your product, right? And then fork it, lower the fees. And eventually you reach a point where the fee is just enough to cover the operational costs. And at that point, something like Airbnb becomes decentralized. So decentralized models don't actually make more money. And that's a big reason why a lot of companies don't actually want to do that. There's music companies now looking at blockchain, but in the music companies, there are multiple intermediaries. Usually, out of every dollar made, less than 7 cents or 10 cents actually makes it to the pocket of the actual musician. That's actually really unfair, and we do want to fix that. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that we're fighting existing systems where those middlemen are not going to be very happy if you cut them out of the loop, right? So as we go into this decentralized business model system, somebody new has to disrupt the market, and that takes a lot of entrepreneurship. So you're not really going to find jobs, but you're really going to find more entrepreneurs trying to pave the way and create this, because it's really not in the best benefit of a lot of companies to decentralize their business models. Finally, I want to talk about Elastos really quickly. So Elastos is, as you know, a big, very large blockchain project that I'm a part of. We also have a DAO. So a DAO is a governing body. In the blockchain world, we call them decentralized autonomous organizations. So Cyber Republic is a DAO of elected officials. And we've also created a new entity called CR Regions under Cyber Republic. So what CR Regions is the business arm of Cyber Republic. Oops, And what we do is we help people with consulting and funding for projects. So Elastos gave Cyber Republic a very large amount of tokens. So we have probably over 1 million tokens left. And with these tokens, which is probably equates to about $2 million, we are funding grants for projects to build on blockchain and build on Elastos. So if you have any projects that you have in mind, or some of the hackathon projects want to take it further, we're happy to talk to you and see if your project is a good fit. And you can always email me at clarence@crregions.com if you have any ideas or questions. All right, thank you guys.
Great. Thanks, Clarence. There's just one question, if that's okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, as systems become more complex and security becomes more robust, what's stopping us from going from 2FA to 3FA to 4FA to 5FA, and where do we draw the line? What are the options do we have?
That's a funny question. 5FA, I don't know what else to do. Something you know, something you have, something you are. Is there another?
Yeah. I mean, for normal folks, they stop at 2FA, and then now we have 3FA. And is there somewhere, because they just want a robust platform, not really worry about so much about the 2FAs and 3FAs. If you talk to a normal person, not a crypto blockchain person, right?
Yeah, it's just that if your identity, another thing is a DID is basically like kind of a JSON structure that's linked to a private key, right? At the end of the day, but that's really your identity, and you're going to have a lot of verifiable credentials that are tied to that one identity. So it's just really dangerous to have someone steal that identity, and they can do a lot of things with it. And especially if the future is built on that sort of, if your educational certificates, your job applications are all tied to identity, just really, really risky to lose that. So that's why we're saying even 2FA probably isn't good enough if we actually transition this new world, right? It's also really good because, like I said, a billion people don't have access to identities. So imagine you're 20 years old and you're starting fresh with no identity. Well, the first thing you're going to have is your iris scan or your fingerprint, right? That is your first time that you actually are now in the world or the system. That's when you first start building your credit score, your trust level, right? And you do need that biometrics. What else are you going to count on in that case? You don't even have a birth certificate, right? So that's for those guys mostly. I think in the real world, maybe you can get away with 2FA. Sorry, in the first worlds, you can get away with 2FA and sort of maybe a federated committee that can control that, the revocation or something.
But in other countries where like you mentioned, the trust is not there on the bank and governments, they might need 3FA and to secure their identities, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Clarence. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you. I'll end the session.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, there's funding for everybody, really. So I mean, I love to hear people with ideas. Clarence@crregions.com, like I said, or just go to crregions.com. You can see our funding process. We do have a fair bit of tokens. If you haven't heard of DAOs, this is really good because even on Ethereum, there are dozens of DAOs. There's Marketing DAO, Bullock DAO. If anyone has a good idea or wants to get in a blockchain, that could be a possible avenue to get initial funding for a project that you like. Yeah, I'll use this one here. crregions.com is a bit better.
All right. Okay, cool.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone.